and this is the problem we have with people. People think they have truth, and they try to steer every event, everything in the direction of their truth, as if their truth is spiritually of more importance than the truth of the man or the woman who has to work 12-hour shifts to pay their kids. The humility found in working those 12-hour shifts can actually bring a stronger level of nirvana or enlightenment than someone just sitting meditating on a rock like the Buddha all day long. Neither is more important, and some humans are attuned to one, some are attuned to other. Empty materiality should by all means be challenged at all times, but it needs to be challenged by someone who can speak on their level. If you go into everything wanting to tell people your truth, you're not listening, and you're not observing, and you're not learning from their truth. And I think that's a lesson everyone can take, and I think it's a lesson he needs to learn, but I don't think he'll learn it while he's sitting on $150 million, because you can't serve two masters. That's just how it will always be.
He has seen too much hatred. The weapon that he chooses is love, universal call now for justice.
Hey guys, so somebody tagged me yesterday in a comment on Facebook, and they asked me my thoughts on Jim Carrey and his sort of public spiritual awakening that's been going on inside of him over these last years, or has been put out into the public. And they more so asked me whether it might be that he was a deceiver. Maybe he was deceiving people, because so on and so forth. Now, first of all, the reason people ask, is he a deceiver? He's part of an industry which is governed by the God of this world, as if you are in any way spiritually or religious person, Corinthians 4:4. It tells you very clearly the God of this world that governs things is not that of the Christ head. Now, he's in an industry where you're making tens of millions of dollars. You're not necessarily always promoting a good message. And he has done a few things which are clearly steeped in Illuminati, as you would call it. Symbolism, elitist symbolism, as I prefer to call it, because there's so many negative connotations surrounding the word Illuminati these days. Ultimately, Luciferian in its roots are the symbols that you see. Now, recently as well, I happened to come across, when he was on a talk show with Jimmy Kimmel, and he did this Illuminati hand gesture, and he mentioned Illuminati. So the thing was that there was a lot of truth with this joke, and he said everybody was part of it, and there's a lot of truth inside that joke, as we all know. You can't break into such an industry unless you're going to rub shoulders with the devil. It's his world, it's his world. Most of the public eye, big name things in America are the domain of Luciferian energy. The idea that you need materiality to be fulfilled ultimately, and the promotion of that materiality to make sure people buy into something which is this world, which is an impermanent world as far as we know, rather than buying into the eternal, which is why people end up on a spiritual journey anyway. Nobody wants to worship sex full time and so on and so forth, because many people are far too wise and realize this is a temporary thing. Why would I invest my energy in something that will go away eventually? Far rather invested in the higher virtues and the pursuit of something eternal, that which we call God. So he has been involved in a lot of Illuminati productions, and he was involved in this Illuminati symbolism, and it is ultimately Luciferian at its core. That is what it is, and this is why people are suspicious of celebrities like that. And recently he's had the typical celebrity tragedies going on. His fiancée or girlfriend sadly killed herself, or it was said to be a suicide, and left a note for him. And then there were charges filed saying it was wrongful death on his part because he gave her the drugs to overdose, etc. All of this is going to weigh heavy on a human being, whether they're Luciferian or not. It's as simple as that. A human being under that amount of public pressure and strain is, without any shadow of a doubt, going to come under a level of pressure that most humans don't feel. And I can have empathy for any human being who's done that, whether they've seemingly sold out to something or not. But in this instance, from what I've seen, I think the thing I was tagged in, he was speaking at a fashion awards ceremony.
Hey, Jim Carrey. Yes.
What?
I've covered a lot of fashion weeks. This is the first time I've run into Jim Carrey. Wait, tell me, is it true you're wandering the streets? You need a date to the party? What's up?
No. I'm doing just fine. I just, there's no meaning to any of this. So I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am.
They're
I
celebrating.
mean, you got to admit it's completely meaningless.
Well, they say they're celebrating icons inside.
Celebrating
Do you believe
icons,
in
boy, that is just the absolute lowest aiming, possibility that we could come up with. It's like icons. Do you believe in icons? I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe that you exist, but there is a wonderful fragrance in the air.
You don't believe certain icons have the power to make change, to think differently, to be bold, to inspire others? Artistry? You're one of them.
On the good foot. Ha! Yeah. You shut it down now. Yeah, no, I don't believe in icons. I don't believe in personalities. I believe that peace lies beyond personality, beyond invention and disguise, beyond the red S that you wear on your chest that makes bullets bounce off. I believe that it's deeper than that. I believe we're a field of energy dancing for itself. And I don't care.
But Jim, you got really dressed up for the occasion. You look good.
No, I didn't
that
get
an
dressed
accident?
up. I didn't get dressed up.
Who did?
There is no me.
There's no you.
No.
We're not here. This is a dream.
There's just things happening. And there are clusters of tetrahedrons moving around together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening in our world right now? Because there is a lot of news that actually is relevant that's not that
Here's
uplifting.
the thing. It's not our world.
None
That's
of this
the
is
key.
real?
Nope.
So you're just passing
We don't
through.
matter. We don't matter.
Oh.
And he said, is there anything more pointless than celebrating icons? And he's right. Is there anything more pointless than celebrating people who have worn nice clothes or drawn nice clothes? Why are they not celebrating humanitarian awards, the development of humanity and invention, which things are celebrated like that? But why would you want to celebrate the meaningless when you can celebrate something with depth? And the thing is, because most of us don't live on that level of depth, because we don't worship the eternal, which is where the depth and understanding of love comes from. We worship the temporal, which is where the shallowness comes from, the idea of worshipping the new shoes or the new coat or the new fashion line. Absolute empty things to worship, unless you're doing some good with them in the world. It doesn't mean you can't like them. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy wearing them. You can take pleasure from wearing nice clothes, so on and so forth, from dressing with your own style. But to have such a huge focus and excitement around it is a little pointless, as he said. But what I can see from where he's standing, there's no need to tell people that we are an energetic field that's dancing at a singular point, I think are the words he used. But it's true, this is what we are ultimately. We are a field of consciousness, and at these singular points of awareness, we are a flickering part, a temporary flickering part of that eternal consciousness that we'll go back to. Aligning with that field of consciousness, however, and remaining there can lead to a lot of problems, because you have to find an element of groundedness. In my experience, for what my opinion's not a thing I like to share, the truth I've had, which will be perceived as my opinion by yourselves, but this is my truth. It's not my thoughts and feelings on it, but in my own experience, in my own truth, when I've touched into meditation and separation has come away, desire has come away, anxieties have washed away, and I've gone into that pool of consciousness, which he speaks about, that energy field, it's very dangerous to stay there for too long. And I did that whilst I was taking drugs a lot, and I would stay there far too long. I would smoke a lot of cannabis and not eat any food, and I'd speak in such a way to people that didn't need to hear about it, because I was completely ungrounded. And I would say things like, well, what's the point anyway? We're just one, like he said, we're just one big energy field, and we're just singular points of awareness that go back to that energy field. And if that's how you want to live, then go sit under a tree and be a Buddha. If that's the message you want to bring, you can't bring it until you come back from that field as the Bodhisattva. You see, if you try to express what you're feeling from that energetic field, you do end up coming across as someone who is a little bit unhinged. And he looked slightly unwell in the video that I was tagged in. And it's very easy to get to a point of unwellness by spending too much time, as Krishna did, as I mentioned in a recent video with the Brahman. You become ungrounded. You've got to come back and look after your body. And if your consciousness can't return from the connection to the field and be the individual point of awareness that you are to live your life, then you're in trouble. I've had people on YouTube who were contacting me before who claimed they were the Christ of this generation. They were smoking a lot of weed. And I knew what was happening to them was what you would say in modern science, a level of psychosis, but in spiritual terms, they were plugged into the field and they weren't coming back. They weren't regrounding. So they started to feel this oneness and this love for everything, and they actually started to believe they were the Christ. The one and only. You see, because that is the energetic field that you are connected to, and the goal of spiritual practice, if you want to find union with God, you need to find a oneness with his creation. And you can do that. You can do that in meditation. But if you stay there for too long and you don't find a way to come back to this world, when you're in situations where you are required to be in this world, then you are going to fall on your face and people are not going to understand you. And some will, and some will cheer it, but the vast majority will not grasp what you're doing, because the vast majority need to hear the message from a grounded person. They need to hear someone say these things, but they need to hear someone say, for instance, we are not important. This is a recent thing. I had a discussion with someone who often comments on the videos about Flat Earth. And I asked a few questions of mine that were in my head regarding this topic, because it's not a topic I take any interest in. But one of the things I said was, I find it a little dangerous that people think that they are the center of creation. It's murder on humility. And if you get too connected to the field and you don't realize that, yes, there is a constant energetic field that you're all connected to, it kind of puts you in the same position, because you are important. You are at the core of existence, to the degree that light is just nothing without your eyes to make it light. Light is light in relation only to our eyes. And thus we are a culmination of all of this around us that can then begin to perceive it. Without the perceiver, what's the use of the light anywhere? And that makes you a centralized point inside your reality. But then the other person next to you is also a centralized point within the reality. And to feel that it has no meaning because we are part of that field defies the point of the creation of this life by God to begin with. The reason God has created this world and the way he has created it, yes, you can go back and you can lay on his chest by connecting to that field of consciousness which is interwoven with his very being. But if you see it as, well, this is now a waste of time, then why bother living? Why go to material events in an ungrounded state if you are not able to communicate your message in a correct way? You see, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you know what you're doing, because you can get so ungrounded in the field that, or inside the energetic field, that you do begin to make no sense, because I've done it myself. And people who don't need to hear what you're saying, people who are on this planet who are just as important within their spiritual pursuit as an individual who's having to work and provide for their children and their family, are no less developed spiritually than the person who's plugged into the field 24/7 and tries to tell these people of the stuff that they don't need to hear or want to hear. You see, there's no difference. Attachment and detachment are both part of the same journey. I've become infinitely detached from everything to the point where my emotional attachments were detaching, and I was struggling to feel proper love and empathy for everybody, because I was in such a heightened state of consciousness in meditation and fasting and substance as well, that I was battling to connect in a real way with those around me. And when I finished that, I started attaching myself to as much as I could. And they are both just as powerful, and they are both just as meaningful. But having no space for one or the other becomes a problem, and thus the term from Buddha is born, that the middle way is the best way. You can go out to one end of the field of consciousness, you can go out to the other end of the field of consciousness. As long as you can come back to a central point and bring back both experiences as something you can communicate to the world. And despite his Illuminati connections, I see a man who is struggling to communicate that. I did see him speak very beautifully about Jesus, and I thought it was very powerful what he said. Now, many people will say he's Illuminati because of what he said, because he said, I can't say for sure that this man existed. I can't say for sure that he lived. But what I can say is that when everybody looks into a picture of the eyes of Jesus, what they truly seek in their hearts is acceptance. And what a really beautiful set of words that is. That comes from a place of love. That comes from the energetic field. It absolutely does. But it's also truth. You know, there's not a Christian on the planet can prove that Jesus Christ walked this earth. It can't be done. If you go on the journey away from the Bible as only truth and look for physical evidence, you can't do it. There's no definitive proof, you know. And truth is the greatest level of knowledge and spirituality. And to say that, to some people will make him look like he's a deceiver. To others like myself, it makes me say, well, he's being very honest and open. For all he senses and feels the love of Jesus, and thus that feeling almost in itself gives Jesus existence, and it gives Jesus existence in thousands, millions, billions of lives all over the planet. He still won't argue with people that he exists or don't, because you can't find out the truth of that. But ultimately inside his heart, which is where it matters, clearly he does exist from the words he used. So I would say, from my knowledge, for what it's worth, from what I've seen, that he is a man on the fringes of consciousness who's struggling to recenter himself. And I think a lot of what I've heard him say can be quite profound and quite in line with some of the things that I myself would say when trying to describe consciousness. But a lot of it's coming from a space where I can have empathy, because this is a man with $150 million in his bank account. This is a man who's been in the public eye. This is a man who has made a living for decades by being the center of attention. And this is a tricky thing, I'm sure, for anyone to come around, because not that the ego is any more negative due to it, but it's a powerful thing to release when you've had a personality. Personality comes from the word persona, which comes ultimately from the word meaning mask. When you've had a personality in the public eye that's expected of you, it must be very difficult to defragment that. I myself have shifted my personality over the years, but thankfully I didn't have the beady eyes of millions of people on me while I did it. And I can imagine that's very difficult. So I'll watch this space and see what he's doing. I see nothing harmful. I see no organized deceptions coming from him, like I've seen with other celebrities with their supposed spiritual awakenings, where they were awakenings that were either manufactured or hijacked by the elites to their own gains and their own ends. I just see a man on the edge of consciousness who needs to get into the middle of himself, or if he doesn't want to get into the middle of himself and remain more towards the Buddha side of things, then just carry on being an artist, but don't, while you're on the fringes of consciousness, don't go and visit very material places with your message, or you're going to come across in a bad light. But if you can come back from the fringe of consciousness to the core of yourself and with your message, then you're absolutely needed to go into such a surrounding. But if you can't get centered, in my experience, when I couldn't get centered, I shouldn't be in public, because I'd steer the mood of things away from what was needed for that area. It didn't belong in that arena, you know. And this is the problem we have with people. People think they have truth, and they try to steer every event, everything in the direction of their truth, as if their truth is spiritually of more importance than the truth of the man who, or the woman who has to work 12-hour shifts to pay their kids. The humility found in working those 12-hour shifts can actually bring a stronger level of nirvana or enlightenment than someone just sitting meditating on a rock like the Buddha all day long. You know, neither is more important, and some humans are attuned to one, some are attuned to other. Empty materiality should by all means be challenged at all times, but it needs to be challenged by someone who can speak on their level. If you go into everything wanting to tell people your truth, you're not listening, and you're not observing, you're not learning from their truth. And I think that's a lesson everyone can take, and I think it's a lesson he needs to learn, but I don't think he'll learn it while he's sitting on $150 million, because you can't serve two masters. It's just how it will always be. Okay. I'm not a Jim Carrey expert, but this is just my analysis that I've seen. God bless, guys. Bye.